Mr. Kleckner, this subcommittee's last hearing, in fact, was on the Biden administration's use of lawfare against political opponents, and we've seen that play out in a variety of ways, including in the case that's been ongoing in New York City, as well as what's been happening in Georgia and Florida, et cetera. But each and every ATF rule subjects more Americans to legal compliance, which, if ignored, even unknowingly imposes criminal and monetary penalties, as well as additional fees and legal costs. Mr. Kleckner, do you think that the rulemaking agenda is an attempt to employ lawfare against Americans who stand for the Second Amendment?
I do.
Okay, and if so, what does that say about where we stand when the Biden administration considers its citizens who believe in and adhere to the Constitution as its political enemies?
That is scary if that's their motivation, and it's very difficult to comply with, for sure.
In December 2023, the ATF Little Rock Field Office received a case referral for Mr. Malinowski. In the same month, it opened its investigation and spent the next several months surveilling his activities, including tailing him and placing trackers on his car. I find this absolutely frightening that we have agencies who are willing to go to this extent with a law-abiding citizen. The ATF knew his movements, his schedule, where he was and when he was there, and therefore the ATF knew when he was home and when he wasn't, meaning that the ATF decided to execute the search warrant when he was home, even though they knew that he would have firearms in the home. And in fact, Mr. Cummings, you have uncovered the fact that the ATF team members gathered to execute the search warrant the week before the raid, but then changed their plan when they learned that Mr. Malinowski would not be home. In other words, they wanted him there, and they wanted him there bad. Mr. Graham, is this standard operating procedure for the ATF to ensure that the target is there when they would execute this kind of a search warrant, or can they do it without the target being in the home?
Madam Congresswoman, unfortunately, I have no firsthand knowledge of the warrant process and or how they are executed. So
well, Mr. Cummins, what about you? Do you think that that would be standard operating procedure to wait until the gentleman was there at 1 o'clock in the morning knowing that he had guns versus just going ahead and executing the search warrant when he wasn't there?
Well, clearly it's a search warrant. He didn't need to be there. I think they definitely wanted him there, and I think that this does happen in federal law enforcement quite a bit. They want the target there because they want to surprise them, and this is part of the reason they go at 6 in the morning. They want to surprise them. They want them in their night clothes. They want their hair stand up. They want them scared, angry, shocked, and then they want to violate their Fifth Amendment right to not incriminate themselves before they remember they have a Sixth Amendment right to call their lawyer. So it's kind of it's the trifecta. They want to violate 3 constitutional rights, the 4th, 5th, and 6th, all in one scoop, and in this case, it didn't work out for them.
Well, and it seems to me that the overarching issue here is that the government should have standards in place to ensure the safety of all citizens in the conduct of its investigations and actions, even when criminal activity is suspected. In the case of execution of a search warrant for Mr. Malinowski, the ATF appears to have deviated from this premise and standards which are in place and, in fact, ended up executing Mr. Malinowski himself.
That's exactly right.
The Constitution secures our rights by placing limits on the federal government's power. Even when an American citizen is suspected of being engaged in unlawful behavior, as you just indicated, the Fourth Amendment secures citizens against unreasonable search and seizure. The Fifth Amendment ensures due process. The Sixth Amendment has certain rights for criminal defendants, and the Eighth Amendment protects us against cruel and unusual punishment. Mr. Cummins, is it fair to say that a responsible execution of a search warrant is one of the primary mechanisms that we have in place to guarantee an American's rights in criminal proceedings?
I can't imagine what the British were doing to people that would be worse than what happened to Brian Malinowski on March 19th that would have brought about the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution.
Mr. Graham, do you have any recommendations of how to address the situation we're describing today to ensure that this does not happen again? What kind of reforms should Congress take up to make sure that we can protect Mr. Malinowski and other people like him?
Madam Congresswoman, once again, having limited exposure to the warrant process and or the execution, I would defer to Congress creating whatever laws, regulations they deem appropriate to be delegated to the appropriate enforcement agency.
Mr. Kleckner, what about you? What recommendations would you have?
I agree with Mr. Graham. I think Congress's oversight here is really important. I think what you asked me earlier about the administrative overreach is these administrative agencies specifically going against what Congress has put into place, like the Gun Control Act or like the willfulness requirement.
Between the bump stocks and the pistol braces and those things, what we have are agencies who are intentionally adopting vague rules and regulations in order to criminalize lawful and constitutional conduct. It needs to end. I appreciate you all being here. I am sorry for your loss as well, Ms. Malinowski. We have to expose these types of activities so that we can prevent them from happening in the future. With that, I yield back.